design is probably my second favorite program only because I love data science so much, but design is a very, very close second. So I'm excited to talk to you today. And I want to really start by level setting because I think our program used to be called UX UI design. And I think maybe that name is a little bit more familiar for folks. So for someone who's never heard the term product design, how would you describe product design for them?
That's a great question as a foundational place to start. I would say the product design includes UI UX. You can think of it as an umbrella or a circus tent, depending on the kind of energy with the team that you're working on. But product design also includes a lot of strategic work mapping to business needs and matching stakeholder needs and business needs with what the users need, and then making sure that the solution can be built within the business's constraints, within the time limits that have been set, within the budget that has been set. So UI UX is a huge part of it. We train all of our product managers to also be product designers because we want them to be able to backfill if necessary, and we want them to be able to be good supervisors of a design team, to be able to have some sophistication and appreciation for what they're looking at. But it's a level up, I would say, from UI UX.
Got you. Because it sounds like it has some tenets of like project management in there as well. It's really understanding the business needs. There's so much more things to factor in when you're thinking about being a product designer, right?
Absolutely. I mean, when you're doing UX, your focus is the user, as it should be, and making sure that you've identified the right problem. You're creating a solution that's going to solve that problem, and you're testing that solution to make sure it works and that the users are pleased. But somebody's got to make sure that you're coming in on time and under budget. And somebody's got to make sure that they can advocate for you if you need additional resources. So it's part of a balanced team. If you think about it, you've got a product manager, you've got a designer, and then you've got your developers. And those three groups working together is what makes a successful application or digital solution.
When you're as a designer, right? I almost like equate it to being a graphic designer, but much is obviously there's a big difference there. What would you say is the difference between a graphic designer or someone that's thinking like a graphic designer versus someone that's thinking like a product designer?
That's a great question. I think that the answer that comes to me first is that you're moving into three dimensions. That it's not just about the visual representation. It might also be about the feel of the product. I was working on a design sprint with Nair a while ago, and what they were looking at was the packaging and how could the packaging better meet the needs of the users. So it was about how it felt in someone's hand, how it conducted heat. Uh, and that's not necessarily something that you're going to have the opportunity to explore exclusively as a graphic designer. You may be looking at what the package looks like on the outside, but you're not necessarily thinking about the button that turns black in the microwave when the product is warm enough to use. And a product
Mm.
designer would definitely be thinking about that.
As a product designer, is it important to meet every need of the business? Because I can imagine that as a business, sometimes you may tell a designer that you want particular things, but as a designer, you're like, I'm not even sure that's really what you want because, sometimes the business is asking for the farm and they're like, almost like with job descriptions, they just add like this laundry list of things that they want. As a designer, like, are you constantly having to like work with the business to say, like, are you actually sure this is what you need to solve the problem that you're facing right now?
That's absolutely one of the questions you would ask. But what I think a lot of people don't appreciate about design is how rigorous it is on the back end, how much research is completed. And what I try to teach our designers is that as long as you can defend your design choice with data, you're going to be fine. As long as you're able to say, look, we've researched best practices, or we've taken a look at the competition and we've done a visual competitive analysis, or we've talked to our users, or we've discovered that most of our users are left-handed, or most of our users are Android users, and so we're not going to design for the iPhone first. As long as you've got that rigor behind it and you've got that discipline so that you can defend your design decisions, it's pretty hard for even the most ornery business stakeholder to argue with you. Now, sometimes you may be in a situation where, they're the ones paying your paycheck. So you have to decide which battles are worth fighting. But a good designer is always going to have a data-driven defense for the choices that they're making. And that's the love language of a lot of businesses you'll be working with. So it goes a long way.
That's very true. And as you say, like defending your position as a designer, I thought immediately of like pre-COVID, I used to go to design presentations for students. So the instructional staff would be like, hey, they're doing a presentation, would love some eyes from someone who's just like outside of the design group, the layman. And I used to go, and it used to be so much fun. Oh, it's so good. And you know what I realize is that every single thing in design is intentional, right? Every single thing is intentional. And then at the end, there would be the time for critique. And the instructors would say, we want to hear you first. So I'll say, I don't really have any feedback. I thought it was great. And then the instructional staff would like pick every single thing apart. And sometimes the students would start to defend why they made those decisions. And I'm wondering from your perspective, what, besides like the data, right? Because the data it's hard to argue the data, right? Are there stylistic choices that you see students defending? And have there been situations where you're like, you know what? It's a good point.
Oh, yeah, all the time. Because the students are intimately familiar with the primary and secondary research that they've done, and they're using it to drive their design decisions. There was one student project, and it was for a sneaker store and in Salt Lake City, and the colors were off the hook. There were this magenta and cobalt, these crazy colors that I never would have picked. And it had a lot of energy behind it. You can make an argument that it worked for the site, but I asked the student, of all the colors of the world, how did you pick those two? And they showed me a photo of a body of water near Salt Lake City where those two colors are in the body of water. It's just this really weird natural phenomenon. And anybody who lived in that area would know that lake and would have seen it and would get that that's what those colors were. So I said, that is a heck of an argument. Sold.
Yeah.
So it happens all the time that I'm looking at something that I don't quite get, but a student may show up and say, well, actually, I chose this font because, or I discovered this about my users. And I say, I'm persuaded.
Yeah. I love that. Yeah. I've seen students defend their position, and I've seen the instructors kind of sit back and say, you know what? Yeah, I wouldn't have personally made that choice, but because you've defended it. And sometimes I'll see them push back just to see how the student can defend the position. And it's on stuff like font choices, too much white space, like things like that. And I just thought it was so interesting that as a layman, I guess I'm just not conditioned to look at every single detail like that. And as a designer, you're constantly looking for feedback. And I think about some of the work that we do here. I don't hear, at least in my career, I haven't heard a lot of people say, here's this thing here's this project, this presentation, what have you. Can you, like, I did this. I need your feedback. Sometimes what they're asking for is affirmation that they did the thing right. And with
They did it
designers,
right.
right, exactly. And what I've noticed with designers is that feedback is so critical that they absolutely 100% need that. And I'm wondering, why does feedback play such an integral part for designers?
I would say it's because we know what we're designing is about perception. Communication is how something is perceived. And so we may have an intent behind our design, but until we talk to actual human beings and have
Mm,
them look at it and say what they see, we won't know if we got it right. Um, it's like cooking. You can make a dish that you think is amazing and it tastes
yeah.
perfect to you, but everybody else around the table says there's too much salt in here. And
Mm,
unless you're open to that feedback, you're not going to adjust your recipe, and people aren't going to be excited to come to dinner at your house the next time. So I would
yeah.
say it's the same kind of thing for designers. And one of the things that we encourage our designers to do is start critique sessions saying what kind of feedback they want and why they want it. And by that, I mean, before they present their work, they may know that some part of their design isn't finished. And so it won't be useful for someone to say, that doesn't look like it's finished. They know that already. So if they can set the expectations at the beginning and say, what I really need your feedback on is, do these buttons make sense? Or what I really need
Mm,
your feedback on is, do these icons look like they're all part of the same family? Or does it look like one or two of them are out of place? Um, how are my photos? How is the color saturation? Um, Maybe they want somebody who's colorblind to take a look at it. They ran it through an accessibility tool online, but they really just want somebody who actually has a physical challenge to give them real life feedback from a human. So I say it has to do with understanding that communication is all in how it's perceived, and unless we're checking to see how other people perceive it, we're in a bubble.
yeah. No, you're absolutely right. And the food example is a really interesting one because some people don't want to know that their food has too much salt in it, right? Like, do you,
Yeah, I don't. I don't.
yeah.
You just come to my house and be nice to me. Yeah, I don't want to hear it.
Do
We
you
worked
do you
hard on
do you
this.
for a designer, to me, what I'm hearing also is that for a designer, ego is really the enemy because you have to be really in tune with what the end user wants ultimately, because it's really, the design is really not about you.
It is not. You are the last person that design is about. It doesn't work for the user, then it doesn't work, period. It doesn't matter that you know the secret uh, backdoor way to get this function to work. If a user who doesn't have any UX training has it put in front of them and they can't figure out to use it, that's a bad design.
Mm,
And something that some programs have gotten away from, and I'm gratified that Flatiron still holds this as a core of its teaching, is that you are not the user. It is always about the user. We use tools like design
yeah.
thinking. We use a lot of different frameworks, but at the end of the day, this is user-centered work. This is human-centered design. And that's what adds value to our clients and makes their applications and digital solutions attractive and appealing and gets people to come back again and again. It has
Yeah.
to be about the user.
Yep. I heard, I can't quote where I heard this from because I heard it probably in passing, but I heard from someone in product design that the most important quality for a product designer is empathy. Is that true?
Yes.
Yeah.
I would say that absolutely, because uh, empathy, not just for your users, but empathy for the devs who are going to have to code what you build,
Mm.
empathy for your stakeholder who has a boss that they have to answer to,
Mm.
empathy for everybody who's part of the equation, empathy for someone in a design studio who maybe is more introverted and isn't joining in the conversation, and you know that they've got something amazing to contribute. So we focus first on empathy for the user, but empathy is really a superpower for anybody who's in, I mean, it is for humans in general, but it's especially important if you're
Yeah.
in design, and you've got to be able to leave your ego at the door and stay humble, because there's always something you haven't thought of.
Yeah.
Always. no matter
Always.
no matter how much domain expertise you may have, there's going to be a user who tells you something you've never heard of before, and you need to know enough to take that in and to be
Mm.
able to assess, is that an outlying opinion, or is that something that deserves more investigation? And I would say 9 times out of 10, it's worth investigating if you've never heard it before.
Mm. Sounds right. That sounds about right. And there's like this openness that designers have to have. I even had that experience working with a designer on like picking out tiles for a bathroom. Like you see this openness. They'll make a suggestion. You're like, oh, that's not really it. Great. Let's move on to something else. There's this real openness to making sure that you're satisfied. They're like the best customer service people ever.
Absolutely, because a good designer is, they're not attached to their outcome, they're attached to the outcome of the product. They
Yeah.
want to meet the customer's needs, they want to meet the stakeholders' needs, and that's the metric that tells them whether they've been successful or not. So it, it's not going to serve a designer to insist on a tile that you hate, because then you're
Yeah.
going to have a bathroom that makes you sad when you go in there, and that's not success for them. Success for them is every time you go into your bathroom, you're like, bang, this is a good looking bathroom.
Yeah.
And uh, and that's the kind of long game we need to be willing to play as designers, as opposed to being really attached to our designs and holding everything as precious. We have to be willing to let go of everything. And at any given time, some of the best designs and some of the best case studies I've read in student portfolios have a big fat plot twist in the middle of them, that they thought they were solving the right problem, and then they got a new piece of information and it upended everything, and they had to go back and undo things and redo them and reiterate, and the product was always stronger for it.
Mm. One more question about the sort of the philosophy about data science. I mean, data science about product design. The
Data
question I
science is
have is,
awesome, by the way.
yes, I completely
Yes.
agree. Um, what role does storytelling play in product design?
Oh, it's so huge. It's so huge, because it's not just, storytelling isn't just about being able to uh, defend your design or articulate your design to the stakeholder. It's about being able to bring the user to life for a developer who maybe didn't get a chance to sit in on the user interviews. It's
Yeah.
about coming up with metaphors that help people understand why something is important. It's uh, it's a really underrated skill, and it's one that we focus a lot on in my cohort. We start from the very beginning, from the first week. We're talking about storytelling and narrative arcs, and uh, making sure that everything has a beginning, a middle, and an end, and that you've
Yeah.
got main characters and you've got a setting. And I can't emphasize enough. The nice thing about storytelling is that everybody has some experience in it. Everybody's everybody understands what it is, and so everybody can upskill. Everybody can become a better storyteller, no matter what your background is, no matter if you've used design software before or not. That stuff is easy.
Yeah.
It's is learning how to tell a good story, and getting those reps in, getting that practice that really will set you apart as a designer.
Yeah, I thought so because when I think of storytelling, storytelling to me is the common language that anyone across the world speaks, and it's kind of the through line between all of our different disciplines. So I was interested to hear about the role that storytelling plays because when I was sitting in on those design meetings, I felt like I was taken on a journey. Like this student took me on a journey that I had no previous knowledge about what they were going to talk about. So I'm there just completely in their world, and whether they told the story well or not is it kind of took me in and out. So you're right, like the level of storytelling that you can produce as a designer, you can really build a world in someone's mind and really take them to really anywhere that you want.
So true. And it's driven by empathy, right? Like we talked about before, the more empathy you have for the user, the better you understand their situation, the more vivid the world that you're going to be able to create. I worked on a project that was, doesn't sound very sexy up front. It was a database for affordable housing. It doesn't sound all that interesting.
Yeah.
But as a researcher, I went out to inform my design, and I thought, well, what must it be like if you're somebody who doesn't have a car and doesn't have childcare? How
Mm.
would I get to this office and take the bus to that office and see if I got lost or not, see if the bus was on time, and then
Hmm.
get there and go up to the front desk without an appointment and ask for information and see what they were able to give me. And going through having the empathy for the user in that way, um, they handed me this massive stack of paper and told me that what I would have to do is go through it and kind of sort it myself with a highlighter. And then I would have to pick up the phone and call each one of these places to see if they had an apartment available. And my heart just sunk because I thought, how is somebody supposed to do this if they're working two
Yeah.
jobs?
Right.
Um, and they don't have time during business hours to get on a phone.
Yeah.
That's where that's where the stories come from and the really powerful solutions come from.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So I want to take a step back now that we've explored a lot of different angles from product design. Now I want to talk a little bit about Houli. So
Oh,
you
okay.
yes. So you've had a really
I
you've
know
had
I know these answers.
I hope so. Uh,
I
you've
can answer these questions.
yeah. You've had an illustrious career. Uh, Worked in nonprofit, worked in music, education, events. What eventually drove you into product design?
Oh, it was the end of that story that I was just telling you. We did the research, we developed the app, and this was some really talented people at the city of Austin working with Code for America, and they built this exceptional app. And I had the opportunity as a designer to help with the usability testing. And so I was in a room one night with a group of people convened by the Housing Authority of the City of Austin, and they had just gotten computers. The people in the room had just gotten computers that they had earned through volunteering and other things. And these were going to be computers that they could take home and have in their house. And it was very exciting. And we said, hey, as long as you're here, would you mind looking at this app that we built? and just telling us what you think. And we gave them the URL and just kind of sat back to see if they could navigate it without instructions. And there was one woman there with her husband and her child, and she took the little quiz at the beginning and she hit enter, and the map came up that showed what places had available apartments. And
Mm,
she clicked on one of them and it had photos of the place, and it showed what bus lines it was on and what elementary schools it was
mm.
close to. And she started crying and she
Oh
said,
man.
"This is a blessing. This is a blessing." And I thought, okay, this is a job. I could do this job. I would
Yeah.
like to have this happen every day. I would like to know that I'm making someone's life better in a real, meaningful way. And so I enrolled in a boot camp and I learned how to be a product designer, and I freelanced and I did some work. And then I started as a TA, uh, just helping out with classes, and realized I loved teaching new designers. I loved introducing people to this world and watching their eyes light up and watching them solve problems and create solutions. And I think I have the best job in the world, that I get to work with adult learners who are pivoting in their careers. They're transforming their worlds into something brand new. And what a privilege and an honor it is to be part of it, to introduce them to human centered design and hopefully be creating, squads of people who are going to go out and change the world for the better.
Wow. That is a that's a powerful story. That is a powerful, powerful story. In it's rare that you hear people speak about you hear people speak about the work that they do as if they had found their purpose. And this feels like, I don't want to speak for you, but if it sounds like you feel like you found your purpose.
Oh, yes. Actually, I was talking to my daughter last night. She's just graduating from high school and a little anxious about the working world. And we said something last night about, we just want you to be successful. And I could tell she was triggered. I could tell that pushed some kind of
Mm,
button. And I said, remember, success is what it means to you. I've had positions where, I would get very important calls from very important people at very late at night, and got a chance to be, on TV news and things like that. And that would seem like success on the surface. And for some people, it probably actually would be. But I said to Maddie, my success is getting up in the morning and being able to walk down the hall and realize, oh, my boss just sent a box of cookies to my class because we she came for a visit last week and just had a really good time. And for me to be able to walk back down the hall with these cookies and see a lieutenant colonel and have them go, cookies, I mean, that's successful. That's
yeah.
successful when you can just show up and be a goofball
Yeah.
in your real life and just be authentic, and people are okay with it. That's success to me. So one of the great things about design is how many people I've seen from wildly different paths get into this work and turn out to be so remarkably talented. I had a student who used to run a food truck,
Mm,
and she came in not knowing too much about design, but she knew how to work with customers. She knew how to manage inventory. She was a disciplined thinker. She was a curious person. She was creative because she was a chef. Knew another student who was an ornithologist, and she had no extraordinary visual eye and visual sense for how to put vibrant colors together in a way that was really just enchanting.
mm.
So anybody can do this work if they're passionate about it and they think it's their purpose. There's a place for you in design. You might be a researcher, you might be an illustrator. There's a home for you here if you care about human beings and want to make a change in the world.
Love it. Love it.
That's my commercial,
Yeah, no, that feel that
just for
and that
design.
yeah, we're gonna just cut that part and just we're gonna make an ad for the Super Bowl. Yeah, for sure. Uh, I think when I was looking up product design, my only interaction with product designers was the projects that I'd seen, which were mostly for websites, for applications, for just tech stuff in general. I even thought of product designers for like hardware, but the hardware in my mind was mostly like laptops, cameras, phones, things like that. And as I did a little bit more digging in preparation for our talk today, I realized that product design is literally everything around you, right? And then I went down this rabbit hole of how designers are thinking about shaping the future, about affecting things like economics, hunger, poverty, things like that. And I mean, my mind got blown because it was kind of like the time I realized that math is everything, is like the measurement of space. So literally everything
Yes,
around you,
it's everywhere.
it blew my mind. So do you
Yeah, it's
think that
powerful.
it really is? Do you think that the impact that design can have on a global scale is somewhat understated?
Yes, I would say it's understated now. I would say that the growth in the last 20 years or so of UX design has been explosive, and major companies like IBM and others have really started to appreciate the value that design brings to them as they differentiate
Mm.
themselves from their competitors. All you have to do is look at Apple.
Yep.
That's
Yep.
that's a company that has used design to turn itself around. Target is another
Mm.
one where there's so much design. If you look at the choices that uh, they choose to carry, if you look at the home decor that they've selected, it's all about design. It's not necessarily about the lowest possible price point. That would be another big chain, but Target differentiates itself by being affordable and having kind of that richness, that achievable luxury of beautiful
Mm.
design.
Ooh,
Um,
it's a good way. It's a good way
I'd
to use
say
it.
the other thing that is really powerful and that seems to be growing is in the United States. It's been a big movement in Europe for some time, but that's the concept of service design. And that
Mm.
would be something like, what's your experience like at the DMV? From the
Mm.
time you walk in, how big is the screen that shares the number of people who are in line ahead of you? Are the chairs comfortable? How is the temperature? How is the room set up?
Mm.
Um, how is the flow? How is the quality of the sound when your number gets called over the sound system? All
Right.
of those all of those points matter. There's a great TED talk about MRI machines and
Mm.
how the first ones were very scary for little kids, and how there are a number of hospitals now across the world that have gone in and realized, well, it's not the MRI machine that's the problem, it's everything that's around it. It's the
Yeah.
experience of going in
Yep.
for a healthcare checkup
Right.
that's got a lot of uncertainty. And
Mm.
so there's one hospital that came up with the idea, well, what if we made it more like camping? What if we made it more like they were going into a tent? And they made a little backpack of camping supplies for the kids to have before they came to the hospital. And they had the room decorated with a little campfire on the wall and trees and that kind of thing. They changed the whole experience for the child, understanding and having empathy for the child and their anxieties and their needs, and it was a lot more affordable than trying to reinvent a massive piece of medical technology. It was,
Right.
some vinyl and paint. on the walls,
Right.
but it took a
Yeah.
designer to do that.
Yeah. That's so interesting because it goes back again to the maybe potential financial constraints because replacing an entire MRI machine is, boatloads of money, but adding that feature to make it just a little bit more comfortable, a little bit more palatable, does the user good, does the designer good, and also does the company good. So that's super interesting because you're always balancing these things. Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, those competing demands and what the hospitals were struggling with they were having a problem too because if a child was anxious, that meant it took longer to do the test. That meant there were fewer patients for throughput through that machine. There were fewer
Yeah.
tests they could charge for. Sometimes the child needed to be sedated, so they need to call in a professional from somewhere else in the hospital and take them away from another patient. So
Right.
there was exposure all around. And
Right.
a designer, by coming in and understanding the user
Mm.
and putting that first, was able to come up with a solution that worked for everybody.
Wow. That's a great point. When when students are potentially thinking about getting into product design, they're looking at product design, they're looking at what the expectations are. What are some of the questions they should probably be asking themselves to really gauge if this is the right move for them?
Mm. Well, I think one question would be, let's say they're a person who's got a strong visual sense.
Hmm.
Um, do Are they able to put their own um agenda, their ego aside and
Mm.
create something that maybe isn't to their taste, but solves the person's need? There's a big difference between art and design. And design in any mature organization is going to have a fair number of guardrails around it, things that you're not allowed to do. There will be guardrails. So that would be one question. Am I the kind of person who can operate within a framework and express my creativity that way, or maybe am I looking for more personal expression? Um, Another thing would be how curious am I? Am I a naturally curious person who wants to know why this works that way and why a person thinks that way and why this button is in this corner and not that corner? If you find yourself just in that space of curiosity, that's going to serve you well. If you're somebody who is looking more for concrete things and a more rigid framework, then perhaps design isn't the best fit for you. That doesn't mean the tech isn't for you. You could be an extraordinary coder, you could be an extraordinary data scientist. But I would say that the students who are most successful in design are the ones who are able to let go of the concept that there's a right answer,
Mm.
or able to let go of the concept that something has to be finished,
Mm.
because it's never going to be finished. There's always another iteration. There's always an update in the app store, you know.
Right.
Um, so if you can live with that kind of ambiguity, then you can roll with being a designer. So I would start there rather than wondering, do I have the technical skills? We can teach anybody technical skills. Everybody knows how to use a computer a little bit. Um, and so we can help you learn. That's our job as instructors. The
Right.
question is, are you coming in with the right framework, the right
Yeah.
worldview? And as long as you've got a growth mindset, as long as you're willing to say, wow, I drew that and it sucks, I am not a great artist yet. As long as you're
Mm.
able to say yet and dust yourself off and sharpen that pencil and get back to it, you're probably your odds are better than average.
Yeah. I want to go back to something you mentioned basically leaving your agenda at home and meeting the needs of the client. Is it hard, or rather, this is a better question. Is it necessary for a designer to have a personal style when they're constantly trying to meet the demands of other clients? Can you actually even have a personal style when you're sort of trying to meet the needs of other clients?
That's a really good question. I think that there's value to having a personal style. It's not necessarily going to show up in your visual designs. It could be that you're a really great copywriter and,
Mm,
and that you have a gift for communicating complicated ideas in a very simple way. Um, it could be that you're a great visual designer and that you are stay on top of all the trends and you're always a step ahead so that your designs always look fresh and modern and new. It could be that you're a great um, kind of mechanic isn't the right word, but you're somebody who understands the tools better than anybody else so that you can create things quickly. And I think of it more as a brand
mm,
that each designer is going to have something that they bring to the table that's a little bit different than
mm.
somebody else. It's their personal story, it's their journey. And so um, for me, I love government. It's terrible, but
Really?
I am Leslie Knope, I'm Leslie Knope meets Ted Lasso meets Mr. Rogers. I'm just super optimistic, and I think that um, people in government are there for the right reasons. They want to be of service, and they have limited resources and they have limited time, and with just a little bit of creativity and support and design thinking, that we can transform some of our public facing services. Um,
Yeah.
that's that's what I care about. So I wouldn't necessarily be applying for a job at I don't want to say anything bad about it. So a major credit card company or
Right.
um, a financial institution.
Hmm.
That wouldn't be the contribution that I could make. But
Right.
there are other people I know who are extraordinarily gifted at working inside systems and explaining really complicated ideas, and they're they're crushing it at places like Charles Schwab. So,
Mm.
um, yeah, I would say it's okay to be unique as a designer. You'll want your basic skill set. You'll want your toolkit of being able to use a design system and being a good communicator and understanding how to speak with developers and maybe knowing a little bit of how to code. But um, after that, it's about bringing your whole self to to work because that's where your value is.
That's so interesting that you said the government. That's so interesting. I went to the DMV, and I mean, usually unless you have to go to DMV for a very specific reason, you usually don't go to the DMV unless your license is expired and you need to renew it. So there was like an 8-year gap in the last time I went to the DMV, and I got to DMV and I was so shocked by how smooth the experience was. I didn't even get a chance to like sit down. The only thing I will say though is, if anyone from the government is listening and they are a designer, if we could do away with paper products in 2022, it is
Oh
2022. Can we
man,
get
yeah.
away from paper products? Like, it's just I don't want to have to write my name down. I know I mean, it's first world problems. I get it, but also it's like New York 2022 should not be writing my name down on a form
Right.
at this point.
Yeah. Yeah, and that I mean, that taps into so many great things about design. It taps into sustainability. It taps into digital equity. It taps into
Mm,
access to resources, and it's all fascinating to
yeah.
me. So yes, moving digitally, we could potentially uh, be saving all those trees. At the same time, you want to make sure there's an emerging field called green UX. That's about how
Mm,
how much um, how much power, how much energy does it take to render this page, and can
mm,
we be more responsible with the designs that we're creating so that they don't require as much bandwidth, but they're still beautiful and they're still accessible and they're still usable. Uh, so no matter what your passion is in life, whether it's the environment or fighting poverty or social justice, there's a place in design for you. Accessibility is huge. It's not just for people who have difficulty seeing. It's also if someone has juvenile arthritis. It's also if someone broke their hand playing ultimate frisbee. I mean, there are all
mm.
kinds of reasons why a person might need to use accessibility tools. So the principles of universal design are fascinating
Yeah.
and something else that we encourage people to explore. It's a whole huge world. I can understand how your mind got blown thinking about everything I look at has been designed. That light
Yeah.
switch, that doorknob, that whiteboard, um, my car, why the buttons are like that on my radio. All of that was designed by
Mm.
somebody on purpose.
Yeah. My mind got blown when it was actually yesterday and I was walking to a restaurant and I looked up and I saw one of New York's many giant skyscrapers. And the skyscraper went up and it was foggy. So it went up and it looks like it disappeared in the clouds. And I thought to myself, oh, that's a beautiful image. That's the first thing I thought. Then I thought, oh man, that looked like somebody painted it. And then I thought, wait, but the building was designed. But somebody, and then it just, the connection between art and architecture made me think of someone designed this. So that's where my mind got blown. And I made the connection with the everything being math, and then math had a lot to do with it. Then math and design had something to do with it. Yeah, I just was like, had a full nerd out on the way to the restaurant.
I love it.
Yeah. So the last question that I always ask any guest on the Tech Perspective podcast is, and you're gonna have a good one for this, I can feel it. What is a quote that you, Houli, live by?
Oh, so many choices. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
but I would say I actually said this to someone in class the other day because we're organizing a potluck because
Oh,
it's Texas
nice.
and somebody just got a new grill. So um, the quote that I live by is uh, where there is cake, there is hope, and there's always cake. There's always cake. There's always cake somewhere. And as long as you can stop whatever it is you're doing and
Wow.
have a bite of cake or have a piece of cake or bake a cake, just take those moments where you can find them because there's joy everywhere, there's beauty everywhere. And if you're going to be solving these wicked problems as a designer or
Mm,
as a human being,
mm,
if you're just going to be putting yourself out there and taking chances and trying to make things better, you need hope and you need to make sure that your tank is full. You need to make sure that your oxygen mask goes on first and that you've got
mm.
the resources, you're replenished so that you can put it back out in the world. So, my advice would be if you're feeling bad, go find some cake and have a bite of cake and realize there are good things in the world and you're going to get back there. This is just temporary. There's always hope, and you're going to get to the other side of whatever it is you're going through.
Couldn't agree more. Without hope, we have nothing. So couldn't agree more there. Houli, it was a pleasure. Thank you so much for joining the pod. Uh,
Oh,
if
thank
people,
you.
yes, yes. If people wanted to get in touch with you, where could they link with you?
They can absolutely connect with me on LinkedIn. Uh, as my identifier on LinkedIn is it's me Houli, but you can also type in Jennifer Houlihan, Houlihan. That will pull it up. But I'd love to do that. Or I'm on Twitter at the J Houlihan, and I always love to chat with people on Twitter. So either
Nice.
place, I'd love to see you.
Cool, cool. And I am your host, Jelani. And please, if you made it this far, like, subscribe, tell a friend, tell a friend to tell a friend, give it to your mom, send it to your dog, please, but just share it. Thank
Smash
you so
that
much for
like button.
smash
Smash it.
that like button. And with that, we are out.